Good morning, YouTubeistas. It is Tuesday, March 19th, 2019, and I want to talk a little bit about race and racism. Again, I'm sticking with my usual themes, the Bucky stuff, Python. I'm not going to mention Python, I don't think. Might work in an angle. I don't really script these tightly, as you probably noticed, but I do have high points I want to hit, and then I wander around kind of like a pinball machine, except more like a spherical pinball machine. Spherical thinking, I've said, is what Buckminster Fuller was also into. And if you ever went to any of his lectures, they would go on for hours and they would seem to wander, and people would come out saying, gosh, I didn't understand a word of it, but it was brilliant, that kind of thing. So I'm not saying I'm brilliant, but I do wander. So here we go. This is about man's most dangerous myth, race. Here we've added IQ. Now this guy, Ashley Montague, is an anthropologist by training. He's from a previous generation, right? No longer living. And Fuller is one of those, I don't know if you read Ashley Montague, but he was one of those who deprecated the concept of race. He thought that was kind of an old-fashioned idea. It's not that there aren't genetic differences. The genome is extremely expressive and lurking within our capabilities untapped. So we can look forward to continued genetic diversity, but he didn't think that the happenstance categorization that people had come up with, like 5 races or 7 or however many, that was not starting down a promising track. That was more animal husbandry. That's the breeders trying to get in control and have us all agree on, breeds. What are the breeds? Breeds, race, what's the difference? Are there races of dog, or are there only breeds of dog? How about horses? How many races of horse are there? I think we agree there are breeds of horse. So are there breeds of human? Well, we don't want to agree on that. Are supermodels a breed? We don't want to say they are. That doesn't sound right. Okay, now I wanted to correct something in the last video. I went by this picture quickly twice under the heading of "Is Bucky a crackpot?" Right? That was one of my most recent YouTube as of today was Bucky a crackpot. That was talking about an article in Wired magazine that suggested, yes, he was totally a crackpot in the worst possible way, they said, but we need to preserve his thinking more than his artifacts. I think they were saying like the house and the car and the dome were kind of wacky, but how he came up with them we need to keep or something. I don't think that, especially the dome, was not wacky, and this idea of it, how it leaked a lot, you forget the oil tank covers and stuff. Like, yeah, it's used industrial all over. The leaky part is not integral to the design. I don't know if the domes, anyway, this isn't Bucky, the domes in England, Cornwall, do they leak? I don't know, maybe. So this was not Bucky is what I'm saying. It's an article in an excellent website by Trevor, a friend of mine, who studies parallels between technocracy and Fuller's thinking, and I actually have a little bit about technocracy in another one of my videos. And there are similarities, but this is not Bucky. I just meant to say it's another person who became a caricature of themselves, is kind of what I was thinking. All right, so let's move on and talk briefly about race. Where does it come from, the idea? And I think we have to go back to the Bible. We have to talk about Noah, and we have to talk about how humans have been a problem for the deity. The God that created humans has not been necessarily that happy. They started out wrecked, the original sin and all that. Or they started out fine in the garden, but quickly things went sour with Eve's being too curious, or, blame Eve for it if you like. But God is always losing his temper and getting rid of everybody. Like Noah was a temper tantrum big time, right? And so there are 2 bottlenecks. You could say there's Adam and Eve are the mother and father of all humans, if you go with that myth, whereas when Noah's family emerged from the ark, they were the only humans left, according to the myth. So everyone descends from Noah's kids, right? And he had like three sons. Here's his family coming out of the ark. They look kind of European, don't they? Lots of textiles there, and they all look, I would say, Euro white kind of. Anyway, where did the races come in? Well, let's move on. So that was kind of a very small group of people. That was the whole of all humanity. They must have felt pretty lonely and knew that it was up to them to repopulate the earth. So remember, the Tower of Babel story comes after this. And let's see. So Noah has three sons, and this is how in modern mythology, if you go to Bible school, they'll help you understand how Noah's sons each gave rise to specific races. What races came from Shem, right? And so you get a lot of charts like this. Shem gave us the Semitic peoples, and then we have Japheth and Ham. And let's see if we can find some more. Here's some interesting. Okay, this looks more just like okay, Scythians, Greeks, Ethiopians, Egyptians. So Ham gave us Libyans. Okay, so those aren't what we call races today, but what we call races just does change horribly. Now here's Orientals also come from Shem, whereas the Canaanites and the Africans come from Ham. And Caucasians, notice, are a whole separate race from the Jews in this case, which a lot of people would agree with, and then other people wouldn't, because isn't Jewish a religion? But that's coming too far forward. That's talking about today, and I'm sort of tracing the myth as it began. So there was kind of a groupthink. God had wiped out all of humans because they were a mess, and but then he had only a few specimens left, and of course they all kind of tended to think the exact same way. And they came up with this harebrained, dumb idea that let's reach up to God with a Tower of Babel. Let's build this thing, and it was kind of like, I don't know, what were they thinking, right? And it's like God was watching, and he's like, you are not going, I can't believe this. As if you think you can reach heaven by building a tall tower. You know, God knows about the solar system. There's nothing out there. You can build a tall tower, but it's not going to get you anywhere. It's going to consume your complete GDP. And then what, right? What a complete, utter disaster. But he's already promised with his rainbow that he's not going to wipe them out yet again for all their foolishness. So what does he decide to do? He confuses their tongues deliberately. He makes it so they can't really get along anymore. So finally the groupthink of the tower is frustrated, and people are forced to disperse, which is where they find out that the world is in fact round and that they are on a sphere. They don't really get that until they finally are forced to give up the stupid Tower of Babel enterprise. And so the dispersion of the group thinkers is how the races came to go to their different corners, right? So that, you know, the Chinese went to China and so forth, so they could, you know, grow up separately around the world. And that's how races came to be. Now, if you don't believe any of that, and, you know, there are cracks in the model, there are anomalies, right? There are things that don't seem to fit the story. And even those who believe in this myth will point out some of the discrepancies if they're feeling safe enough, right? Let's see. I could go on, but I do encourage you to study where race comes from in our modern world and study curricula. Watch how Bible studies go, and, you know, even today in 2019, you've got a lot of kids being schooled in this mythology, and it's legal to teach this stuff because in the United States, at least, you can teach anything basically to kids. It's fine. And if you try to change what they learn, then you're a totalitarian. So don't expect this stuff to go away, is what I'm saying. Just be aware that a lot of people are programmed by mythology. That's nothing new. So I hope to see you in the next video. Talk to you later.